For decades, Iran has positioned itself as the defender of the Palestinian cause, projecting influence across the region through that narrative. But that image is fading. Tehran faces growing isolation and weakened alliances. Since October 7th, the regional map has shifted dramatically. Arab governments are recalibrating, and several Western states, including France, Spain, Ireland, and Canada, have formally recognized a Palestinian state. Yet Iran's influence appears to be shrinking. Under the renewed version of the Trump peace plan, Hamas is not expected to have a future role in Gaza's governance, raising new questions about what remains of Tehran's reach and credibility in the region. I'm joined today by two voices from Gaza: Khalil Sayegh, a political analyst now based in Washington, D.C., and co-founder of the Agora Initiative, and Hamza Howidy, a writer and activist from the We Want to Live movement, now living in Germany.
What will eventually happen when a Palestinian state emerges is that the Iranian regime would lose its biggest ideological weapon that they are using, that is the grievances of the Palestinian people and its weaponization to justify its new imperialism in the region and to justify its repression of the Iranian people.
Question is, how can one go beyond that? How one can dismantle and disconnect the Iranian regime from Hamas in Gaza?
Together, we'll look at how Iran's regional weakness is reshaping perceptions of power, resistance, and peace, and what the Palestinian cause might look like beyond Tehran's reach. I'm Negar Moshehedi, and this is Eye for Iran. Delighted to have Khalil Sayegh and Hamza Howidy joining us today. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
To be here.
Wonderful. It's really an honor to have you both. Before we get into the Iran angle in all of this, I wanted to start off with both of your stories and getting to know a bit about both of you. Khalil, you grew up in Gaza, and now you're based in Washington, D.C. Hamza, you also grew up in Gaza. You were held captive by Hamas not once, but twice, and now you're living in exile in Germany. Khalil, let's start with you. Can you tell us each a little bit about your own journey, what shaped your perspective, and how those experiences and tragedies have shaped how you see the war, the region, and also the Islamic Republic of Iran as well?
Sure. So I was born and raised to a small Christian refugee family in Gaza that have experienced the Nakba in 1948. My family is originally from a city called Majdal in historical Palestine. They were ethnic cleansed in 1948, came to Gaza. And I lived through the Intifada, I lived through the wars in Gaza. I also lived through the Hamas takeover of Gaza. And, obviously it's known that Hamas is backed by the Iranian regime. And I remember a time where I start becoming politically aware pretty much in a young age. I was 15 and I would protest against Hamas, and we were beating up several times. And I remember hearing always that the techniques that Hamas uses is from Iran, and they're learning it from the regime there, etc. So all that is a context, but also in addition to my experience in Gaza under the occupation, under Hamas's authoritarian and brutality, one of the things that really shaped how I think about Iran was the Syrian revolution and the amount of repression Syria had. I remember 2014, I volunteered at a Syrian refugee camp in Jordan. And over there, I had to confront the ugliness of the Iranian regime, because it really has done horrible things in Syria.
And also, Khalil, during this war, you lost both your sister and your father.
That's correct, and unfortunate that they were both indirectly killed by the Israeli war. And I lost countless friends as well, and relatives. It's been a horrific experience.
Very deeply sorry, and my condolences to you and to your family and extended family as well. And Hamza, tell us about your experience as well, please.
Yeah, so I come from a family that originally came from Jaffa. My grandfather was born in Jaffa and lived in Jaffa. Then to be displaced as the 700 plus thousand Palestinians who were expelled in 1948. Then for my family to live in Gaza. But to an extent, I would say that my family, if one can say, quote unquote, moved on and have their life in Gaza and not politically associated with any of the political parties, just a normal family trying to have their life in Gaza. Then, for the 2007 coup, when Hamas took over the power in Gaza violently, and for me as a little child to witness all these events, especially that I used to live in an area where, like, the parliament is there, the ministries, the organizational stuff. So I had to witness the coup and all the violent crimes that happened back then in this era. But that was something that unfortunately many Gazans had also to live with, and we considered ourselves not participants in that, just only witnesses for that to continue and to live with the wars that started from 2008 and continued so on until somehow I became like internally politically activist in Gaza, just about the change of the regime in Gaza in 2019 that got me arrested. And then to be arrested again in 2023. But before going to 2023, in 2021, in the military escalation between Hamas and Israel, I was also almost killed by one of the airstrikes in Al Wahda Street where I live, which claimed the life of a very close friend of mine, Dr. Ayman Abul Auf, who was sitting
I'm
with
very
me
sorry.
who was just sitting with me 10 minutes before he was killed. And we were talking, and then he left home, and then the bombardment started, and then he was killed, which made me realize that even if you are not politically active, even if you are not associated to Palestine and Israel, the fact that you are living in Gaza means that you can be killed in any second. Whether that will come with the countless wars that Israel launched on Gaza, or with Hamas's oppression, with the torture that sometimes ends with the people being killed in Hamas's torture places. Then to participate in 2023, and after my second imprisonment, I realized that, okay, I want to have my life as a human being in whatever place that is not all about violence. That was the reason why I decided to leave Gaza just weeks before the war. Then for October the 7th to happen, and then for me to become politically active again. But the thing, if we are talking about the Islamic regime in Iran, I mean, one of the most things that always frustrated me is looking back to Oslo in 1993 when peace was almost done between Palestinians and Israelis. One can say it was maybe the only peace treaty that was signed between Palestinians and Israelis. Then to see the Islamic regime in Iran finances and motivating Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and other factions to go against this agreement. They were protesting back then in 1993, and as we had the extreme right wing in Israel that ended up with killing the prime minister who signed on the agreement, we also had the right wing, if one can describe it as a right wing in Gaza, that was inflating people to go against the Oslo agreement, to go against the peace agreement, which continued until now. And regarding the oppression of the Islamic regime in Iran, I still remember in Oslo, in the last Human Freedom Forum, when Masih Ali Najadi spoke with other 3 Iranian activists. I still remember the moment when one of the activists who lost her eye in the protest against the regime, she told us if we can close one of our eyes just for 5 minutes, and then to tell her what we saw. And the answer was just black. We didn't see anything because we closed our eyes. And I remember what she said. She said, "You saw black, but for me, I can't even see the black thing." And that made me realize how brutal this regime is to make a woman lose her eye, or the other one who lost her arm just for a scarf on her head or whatever. That made me realize that there is something more brutal than the Hamas we have in Gaza.
Wow. And Khalil, what are your thoughts on that?
On what part?
So in terms of, I mean, what I gathered from what I'm hearing from Hamza is that it seems like the Islamic Republic of Iran doesn't want a free Palestine, doesn't want Palestinians to be strong, and that they're trying to control them and basically hijack this movement. We can talk more about that, Khalil, and then Hamza, we can come back to you.
Absolutely. So the Iranian regime has had its interest in a continuous conflict with Israel, and in that conflict of proxies over who controls the Middle East, who has the hegemony over the Middle East. The Palestinians have been used as pawns in this game, very cynically, right? And it's not to say the Palestinians don't have grievances with Israel, and that even our extremist groups, including Hamas and others, are not motivated by grievances. Of course, there are grievances, all of that, but all these grievances and feelings have been weaponized by the Islamic Republic to push a certain narrative. I mean, Hamza laid out well the aspect of the Oslo Agreement and how Iran has managed to oppose that. But not only did they oppose the Oslo Agreement with Israel, even before that, they refused to acknowledge the Palestinian Liberation Organization as the sole representative of the Palestinian people for so long. They tried to create the alternative by funding Hamas, supporting Hamas and the Islamic Jihad and others. And the goal is very clear: not to have a two-state solution, not to have a stability in the region, because the Iranian regime survive on chaos in that region, survive on this neo-imperialism that has been expanding in Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and other areas. And it's very unfortunate that we live at a time right now, in light of the genocide in Gaza and everything that's happening, where there is a new emerging movements in the West where they're very critical of Israel. Rightfully, they should be. I mean, they've committed genocide, but a lot of them have shown to be naive when it comes to the Iranian regime, and thinking that there is some sort of good thing that could come out of this Iranian regime. Again, this is not only a regime that have committed horrific massacres, unfunded horrific massacres in Syria, Yemen, and Iraq, but also they've committing extreme violence against their own people inside Iran. So the experience with the Iranian regime in the region is very terrible. I mean, you could look, the Palestinian case obviously is a good example, because Iran has maintained the Palestinian division between the West Bank and Gaza, and that's has been used by the Israeli regime to argue that two-state solution is not possible because of the Iranian funding to Hamas, because of the missile system, etc., which have shown, by the way, during this war, that it's completely ineffective, and it didn't protect one child in Gaza. The entire what's so-called resistance has utterly failed. But not only in Palestine. I mean, you look at Lebanon, the Lebanese state could be considered a failed state to an extent. I mean, it is a failure. Up until before the Syrian revolution went to, Syria has become really completely isolated state with, running its economy literally on Pentagon, sorry, not Pentagon, Captagon, and other drugs that they're selling. So I think that there is a general sense in the region, general understanding that the Iranian regime is a danger. I think also the majority of the Arab world and the Palestinians are critical of the Iranian regime and do understand that it's danger for our future and stability. That being said, there are minorities that would sometimes adhere to the Iranian regime propaganda, because the occupation continues. The Israelis are oppressing the Palestinians, and the Iranians succeed sometimes. By Iranians, I mean the Iranian regime, obviously, succeed sometimes at capitalizing in these grievances, weaponizing them, and manipulate them to gain certain support for the regime and its project of what's so-called resistance in the region.
So that's fascinating. So in some ways, Khalil, you're saying that the Iranian regime is benefiting not just Hamas and Islamic Jihad, but also the Israeli right-wing parties that don't want to see a two-state solution.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Since day one, the extremists in the region has been feeding each other, and the Israeli right-wing extremists are on the record saying that Hamas is good for us, and therefore we have to support them and fund them, and that's not a secret. It's a well-known documented thing. And also the other thing is that the existence of the Iranian regime has been weaponized and used by Benjamin Netanyahu for so long to sway fear among the Israelis, to to seed fear also among the Americans, Christians, the minority in the region, of saying, listen, this is a regime that wants to destroy Israel. This is a regime that threatens the West, that threatens the values, etc. And it does not help that in Iran they go on the streets and shout, oh, this to the Jews, this to America. If you're an average citizen in that region and you listen to that, I think that you be convinced of that. And what this does, it enforces this whole, security mindset of Israel, that we have to be powerful, we have to oppress the Palestinians in order to ensure our security, etc. And that's a very, obviously it's an illusion. You can't achieve anything doing that. But it has been fitting to the Israeli right-wing narrative. I think that one of the biggest liability that the Palestinians have in the region is the Iranian regime. I think that's a fact, and it's it's actually ironic because not only have they funded all these militias and substantial peace, etc., but the irony is we don't have even a single hospital or school funded by the Iranian regime in Gaza or the West Bank. Not a single aid truck has gotten there. We have a lot from the Arab states and from other nations, even Europeans, Asians, but not the Iranian regime.
Hamza, do everyday Palestinians, in your view, see that disconnect between this rhetoric of the Iranian regime claiming to be, the moral authority in the region, claiming to be for the Palestinian cause? Do everyday people see that as well?
I think, to my understanding, at least to the people inside the Gaza Strip, I think there is a large understanding of the role of the Iranian regime, and that their interest goes beyond the Palestinian cause or the Palestinian question, if one can name it. I mean, I still remember that even during the current war, when the Iranian president was died in the helicopter incident, and when the Hamas affiliated people tried to make a poster for him inside Gaza during the war, the civilians themselves decided to go to take over this poster, because there is a huge hatred for the Iranian regime inside Gaza, because those people see the Iranian regime as number one, the financer and the reason why Hamas is still there in Gaza. I mean, despite all this, the hardships, the siege of the Gaza Strip, and even the sanctions that, if one can name it as sanctions, that the Palestinian Authority imposed on Hamas's rule in Gaza, in a way trying to weaken Hamas's rule so the Palestinian Authority can come back to the Gaza Strip, Hamas thrived on the Iranian regime's support, whether we are talking about financially or militarily, because still the question of October the 7th is a big question. I mean, the military capabilities and how Hamas entered Israel is still a big question. But still, the people inside Gaza understand that, and they understand that without the military and the financial support that Hamas has from the Iranian regime, we wouldn't have seen Hamas that we have now. I'm not saying that Hamas would disappear in a day. No, they would most probably continue to exist, but not in the same power, not in the same maximalist demands that they have about dismantling the Zionist entity, about not making peace, not making reconciliation with the Palestinian Authority, about the dream of exporting the Iranian or the Islamic revolution from Iran to the Gaza Strip, because according to even to the Iranian regime, not only that they describe the revolution as an Islamic one, but they also say that it's not limited to the Shia people. They are trying to export that to even to the Sunni communities, whether we are talking about Yemen, to some parts Iraq, Lebanon, Gaza, and the list goes on. So I think this hatred exists, and the question is how can one go beyond that? How one can dismantle and disconnect the Iranian regime from Hamas in Gaza? Because I think we are seeing that now happening in Lebanon with Hezbollah, and to an extent disarming Hezbollah. But the question now is how to disconnect Hamas from the Iranian regime.
So how do you do that? I mean, according to Trump's peace framework, Hamas will not have a political or military future in Gaza. How do you do that and disconnect from the Islamic Republic in your view?
I think there is many questions about Trump's quote-unquote peace plan, if one can name it a peace plan. But the thing about Hamas, I think they will be weakened tremendously because of the incidents that happened during the past 2 years. Talking about the end of the Syrian regime, the notorious Bashar al-Assad and his regime, and then to the defeat or deterrence of Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the disconnect between for the military smuggling growth that was going from Iran to Syria to Lebanon and those countries. So I think we will see that being happening as long as the situation continues with an anti-Assad, anti-Iranian regime in Syria, and the same for Lebanon. So I think we are seeing that happening right now.
What are your thoughts, Khalil, on distancing the Palestinian cause from the Islamic Republic of Iran and having that control?
I do think that there is a growing realization among Palestinians, even including Hamas, by the way. I mean, some leaders in Hamas have stated clearly that they're disappointed by the Iranian regime and that they haven't seen the level of support they were expecting during the war in Gaza. And I think there is a general awareness in that. The public in Gaza, as Hamza alluded to, are very critical of the Iranian involvement, not only because it propped up Hamas and prevented the reconciliation internally, but, we have a brotherly relationship with the Syrian people, and we're very much in common, and we were watching what the Iranian regime have been committing in terms of crimes against the Syrians. All of that has left its scars on the Palestinian people, and the memory is quite long when it comes to these issues. To see a fellow Arabs and fellow Sunni Muslims being massacred in Syria has its own traumatizing effect on the Palestinian people. Into how do we disconnect the Iranian from the Palestinian issue? I think the start comes with really limiting the power of the proxies that Iran has in the region. We're talking about Hamas. Hamas has to be limited. That's already established to an extent in Gaza, although it's not very clear what phase 2 would look like in the ceasefire and whether it would come about or not. I mean, I have a lot of doubts myself about it. I think it could have been done much better, more effective in the last 2 years, but the Israelis are a main obstacle to that. In Lebanon, we're seeing also the Iranians are weakened and they lost Syria, and Syria was their biggest front to claim that they're coming to liberate Palestine, right? I mean, Syria, the whole Syrian thing is like, oh, this is, Tariq al-Quds. This is the road to Jerusalem or the road to Quds. And they lost that. So to an extent, the Iranian power in the region has been limited. Also, the attack, the 12-day wars on Iran, etc., has also limited the Iranian regime and also its reputation in the region. That being said, still they have leverage and they have power, and I think only time could tell how this could happen. But if we manage to disarm Hamas and disarm Hezbollah, I think that ultimately the Iranian regime will be more limited in its leverage in the region, and therefore, there are two directions they could go on. And I'm not an Iran expert in any means, but I can just predict them of my mind. Either like they have to moderate their views on these issues, or either they have to like push more toward the direction of having a nuclear weapon and to just consolidate their power forever there.
Wow. And what do you know of the Iranian regime's activities right now in the West Bank? Because it's my understanding that now that they're losing influence in Gaza, they're trying to stoke up some controversies in the West Bank.
There has been some groups that emerged in the West Bank, with some weapons that have been called, like we've been told that they've been financed by Iran through the Jordanian border. And, that was back during when the Syrian regime was in place too. The Jordanian Syrian border is quite long and it's very hard to control. And there have been a lot of smugglings of weapons from there. And then from Jordan to the West Bank to certain groups, like we've seen with the Islamic Jihad in Jenin and other areas, etc. This has been to an extent decreased after the Syrian revolution has succeeded to topple Assad. That has decreased the phenomenon of weapons, etc. They're still trying to direct activities in the West Bank, but to a very large extent, they're completely failure for two reasons. That the Israeli occupation there is effective in the way it represses the Palestinians. And the second reason, which is, I think, more importantly, is the Palestinian Authority coordination, security coordination with Israel, and their crackdown on these kind of groups. Because the last thing you want to see is a scenario in which militant groups emerge in the West Bank that would facilitate to Israel its dream of ethnic cleansing the Palestinians, because Israelis are looking for a war opportunity in the West Bank in order to get rid of the Palestinians, and that has to be prevented from a Palestinian point of view. So that has been also a failure for the Iranian regime to an extent there. They keep trying, from what I know, but I don't think they will succeed in the West Bank.
And Hamza, what do you think? And what do you know of your knowledge in terms of their activities there? Could they use, like Khalil was saying, the oppression right now in the West Bank to manipulate certain groups of people there, potentially?
I think in the last year we saw some incidents of that, but I do confirm to an extent what Khalil said, because we saw what happened in Jenin last year with the groups that claim to be supported by the Iranian regime, and we saw also how the Palestinian Authority, before coordinating the security, tried to crack down on these groups, but then later for Israel to come to the Jenin camp. And I think the security coordination continues. And I think the most important thing here is not to exaggerate the capabilities of such groups, because when I saw, and from what I hear from the people, it's an absolute joke, to be honest. The one that was leading the groups in Jenin was actually a drug dealer, and he was caught with a niqab hiding from the Israeli army. And many of them has a criminal history in the West Bank. So the Iranian regime is trying to exploit those criminals to claim that those people are going to support Palestine. But as Khalil said, we should be careful of not exaggerating the capabilities of those people, because I think the thing that the Israeli government will do is just to use those people as a reason, or as a quote-unquote justification to do what they did in Gaza, to export that to the West Bank. And we saw some statements from, for example, the statements by the Israeli minister, Israel Katz, Smotrich, and others, that they are trying to make this rhetoric that Hamas exists in the West Bank, that the Iranian regime exists in the West Bank, to give a justification to do what they did in Gaza in the West Bank. So I think it's not that serious, it's not that big. And I think with what we are seeing right now, with the crackdown on the axis of the Iranian regime, and the coordination, the security coordination, whether we are talking between the Palestinian Authority and Israel, or Jordan, the Palestinian Authority, Israel, the Gulf countries, naming Saudi Arabia and UAE, I think the role of the Iranian regime will be extremely limited in the Middle East.
And Hamza, you mentioned that you're starting to see some of the signs there of certain figures in the Israeli government to, as you mentioned, over-exaggerate Iran's role in the West Bank. If you're seeing the signs, where do you see this going then? What's the trajectory like, given both of you have lived in Palestine, and you know kind of what the next moves may be based on what's happened in the past?
Understanding the only reason why would those ministers exaggerate and do this rhetoric about the Iranian regime's influence in the West Bank is just to give a reason for ethnically cleansing the Palestinians from their lands, from their communities in the West Bank, which is what's happening right now, by the way, with the crimes that is happening by the Israeli settlers supported by the army and the police, is to give this reason to expel those Palestinians from their lands to Jordan, because to an extent, this rhetoric existed 1 year before, that the Gazans would be moved to Egypt, and the West Bankers would be moved to Jordan, and that's it. That's how we get rid of the Palestinian question, or the Palestinian cause. So I think the only translation of this rhetoric is just to give a reason to expel the Palestinians from their lands to Jordan or to whatever countries.
Khalil, what is it like? I want to ask this question to both of you. Khalil, we'll start with you, and then Hamza. What is it like watching this all unfold from afar? How do you feel?
It's complicated feelings, right? I mean, it's a mix of feeling, uh, obviously sad over what's happening, the death, the killing, all of that, and sense of survival guilt, especially during the war. One feels that guilty for surviving. It feels like life does not have a taste anymore. All these are feelings associated with trauma that comes from war. Even if you are far, still you received all these trauma. But also you feel a burden of responsibility. We have a responsibility to speak up when we are out, to be rational, to analyze, to be careful, and to not get into, there is a trend of simplification of the whole thing. It's very simple. It's this or that, right? There's only one actor, etc. And I don't think we have to get into that. I think the issue of the Palestinian people at its very core, the main issue is the Israeli occupation and the lack of freedom. To an extent, that's something that we share with the Iranian people, is that we are lacking our freedom. In their situation, it's because of the Iranian regime. In our situation, we have multiple oppression. I mean, we do have the oppression from the Israeli occupation, and that is the primary cause of all disasters that we have. But then secondary, we also have the Hamas and the other militant groups there. So it's a complicated image, and one has to delicately know how to navigate it, analyze it, and present it to the public, because I think what we say matters, and what we try to do in terms of advocacy and showing, politicians and the public opinion in the West, what is the road toward peace and toward justice for the Palestinians, is quite important task that we have been given.
Hamza, how do you feel?
I think the word that might summarize my feelings during the past 2 years is just to feel helpless. Because I'm not used to leave Gaza or to live outside of Gaza. It was my first time, and I didn't expect it to be like this, and to see something like this happening to my own people. Nothing like this. I mean, yes, we had many wars in Gaza, but nothing was like this in Gaza. To see people in Gaza dying of starvation, of cold, of displacement, dying intense. It was extremely hard to me, and not to mention the frustration and how one can lose his nerves when you know that a specific area is being bombed, and then you lose the connection with your loved ones in this area. Then for you start to think what might have happened. That was the feeling that I had for a long time during this war, and I think it's the case for all the people who have connections to the Gaza Strip. We lost our nerves, and we try to compensate with that, for me, at least personally, with my activism in social media or appearing in interviews or podcasts like this, to tell this story, to tell the suffering, the story of my people who are just being killed in a broad daylight. And that has been going for 2 years. And for one to think of what can be probable solutions, because at the end of the day, we are looking for a solution that can get the two societies to live together. If it was a one state, if it was 10, it's not a big issue for me. And I think for the large parts of the Palestinian society, just to have a place where we can live. I'm not talking about nationalities. I'm talking about a place where we can live, having our equal rights with justice. Name it whatever you want, Israel, Palestine, or Banana Republic. It's not a big issue. But for the people to live with a just peace, safely, not to worry in the next day if your family will be killed, if they will be detained on a checkpoint, if they will be expelled from their lands, if the list goes on. We just want to have a normal life like everyone else.
Yes, exactly. And I, you hear this from also people in Iran too, when they say, what do Iranians want? They just want a normal life. It's that universal and human emotion for all of us. And also, many G7 countries now, including Canada and the UK, France, Italy, they have recognized a Palestinian state. What would that mean for the Palestinian people and for the Islamic Republic of Iran to have a Palestine that is free from Hamas, and by extension, then free from the Islamic Republic too, in many ways? We can start with Hamza. Why don't we start with you and then Khalil after?
Um, so yeah, for the recognitions of the recent recognitions of Palestine, I think, yeah, it has an influence, but I wouldn't exaggerate that influence for the Palestinians. I think it's important for the countries who did not recognize Palestine to do that. I mean, it's a fundamental right, and I wouldn't go for the argument that this is supporting Hamas, because Palestinians' right to self-determination and to have a state predates Hamas before they were even born. And I think there is enough argument about how this supports the moderate people in Gaza and not supporting Hamas. But I think it's also important to give the Palestinians a sense of a balance, if one can say, during the negotiations, because during the negotiations with Israel, I think there is imbalance between Palestine and Israel. I mean, all the leverage and the support goes to Israel. So I think it's to an extent putting the balance in the future negotiations, but still there wouldn't be a balance as long as the United States continues as it is right now, because it's the most important one. And I think also with the recognition of the Palestinian state, those states who recognize Palestine, implicitly they are recognizing the military occupation of the West Bank, the longest military occupation during the past decade. So with this recognition of Palestine, there is also responsibilities of how can one address the occupation and how to end the occupation. Regarding Hamas and the Palestinian and the Islamic regime in Iran, I think the most important thing is dismantling and standing against the narrative of the Islamic regime in Iran, because according to the Islamic regime in Iran, there is no right for Israel to exist, and this land from the river to the sea belongs to the Muslim Palestinians or whatever. So I think this is going against it by saying that this is a land for two societies. This is based on a two-state solution, going against the Islamic regime's narrative and also Hamas's narrative, to prove that this land can be shared between the Israelis and the Palestinians.
Khalil, your thoughts?
I think the recognition have came so late, unfortunately. If taking a genocide for the world to recognize that the Palestinians deserve a self-determination and basic rights, fundamental rights. And I think the recognition came late, but it's positive. It's still a very positive development, one that, ensure that, the future conversation has to be about the fact that there is one state under occupation and has to be liberated from occupation, rather about talking about possibility of two-state solution. For so long, we have wasted so much time on this whole notion that perhaps a two-state solution could be a possibility. Perhaps it could emerge when the entire world recognizes a one state that is the state of Israel and don't recognize the state of Palestine. So I think the recognition switches the conversation from a place of let's talk about what's the final status to saying the final status is clear. It's a two-state solution. These are the boundaries. This is the recognized state. You just need to end your occupation to Israel. My hope is that what follows from that is what matters more, because what we need sanctions. We need diplomacy, pressure, etc., on Israel to end its occupation. And the only way to do that is for countries that recognize Palestine to follow that through to the natural conclusion. That is, if there is a state of Palestine and it's occupied, therefore settlements are illegal and has to be sanctions. Therefore, weapons that are used by settler terrorists are illegal, has to be not sold to Israel. The military occupation and the military usage of different type of weapons is illegal in those things. So these kind of pressures, I think, would be can make a difference in how Israel operates itself, and can make a difference in terms of the Israeli public opinion that is quite supportive of war and occupation right now. But I think if enough pressure is put on the Israeli side, these things could change, and could change quickly.
I just wanted to end with any final thoughts. Hamza, we can start with you, and then Khalil. Just any final thoughts to conclude.
It's all good for me. I don't have any following notes.
What about you, Khalil?
I'd say we are at a critical time, a time in which, things can either go bad and we could have more wars and we could be stuck where we are right now. And that would be terrible for the Palestinians, that would be terrible for the Iranians, that would be terrible for everyone. Or the other option is that we move toward peace and justice in the region, and that require holding actors responsible. And the main actor here that has to be held responsible is the State of Israel and its current government. And I think if we succeed at doing that, and if we succeed at, bringing pressure toward peace, etc., we would be able to isolate the extremists within the Israeli government, and Israeli society would be able to have a Palestinian state emerge. And that would also isolate the Islamic Republic of Iran. I think that what will eventually happen when a Palestinian state emerge is that the Iranian regime would lose its biggest ideological weapon that they're using, that is the grievances of the Palestinian people and its weaponization to justify its new imperialism in the region and to justify its repression of the Iranian people. So if we get there, I think there is a bright future ahead of the region.
It's good to end on a positive and happy note that way. And it was an honor and a privilege to speak with the both of you. And I wish you both all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nisha.
You can sign up for our weekly briefing newsletter at iranintl.com/newsletter. We deliver what you need to know with top stories, key analysis, and exclusive reports direct to your inbox. The Eye for Iran podcast series is brought to you by Iran International, your go-to destination for expert Iranian news in both Farsi and English. For more, you can head to our dedicated English website, iranintl.com/en.